Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. This is the Town of Kennebunkport Planning Board, January 17th hybrid meeting. People can come in on Zoom and watch the meeting or be here in person. I'm going to open the meeting, basically, and we have several members of the board here. Tom is absent, he is traveling, and I know that George is traveling, but the rest of the board is here and present. I want to ask whether everybody has read the minutes.
Yeah.
If there are any changes? No? Okay. Well, in that case, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And Ed,
Approved.
I approve.
Approve.
Go ahead.
Approve.
Larry?
Approved.
Okay. In that case, we'll take us to our first item on the agenda. We only have two tonight. I want to point out to people that the Wiles District subdivision has been postponed at the request of the applicant, and so will not be taken up today, but will be taken up in February at our first meeting. So the first item on the agenda is 132 Marshall Point Road, Marshall Point Realty, Walsh Engineering Associates, that are basically covering this for the owner applicant. And it looks like Warner is here for Walsh, so if you'll introduce yourself and go ahead. This is going to be a public hearing, but I'll open it up to the board first.
Great. Yes, thank you, Nina. Again, for the record, my name is Warner Gilliam. I'm here from Walsh Engineering, here on behalf of Marshall Point Realty LLC, which is Mark and Rachel Aslett. My colleague Norm Chamberlain is also available on Zoom if needed for any technical questions. So just to recap here, the property that we're reviewing this evening is 132 Marshall Point Road. It's located at the very end of Marshall Point. It's about 1.36 acres of land on the southern side of the Batson River, which looks directly over at the west end of Goose Rocks Beach. And the property at that location, at very low tide, you can actually walk back and forth between Goose Rocks and Marshall Point. Property has a little over 500 feet of shoreline, but yet the subject of tonight's application request is for approximately 165 feet of shoreline that we're requesting to be able to repair and restabilize. So since we were here last, there have been a number of changes to the property, which I don't think is of any surprise to anyone, given the intense storms that we had over the past week. And so to that end, I'd like to just provide the board, with a little bit of a pictorial update, of, what I shared with you last time and what the current conditions are of the property, just so you can see where we're at. So this first piece is just going to be a little short video walking around the property. So, Dave?
Was this after both storms or just the one?
This was 2 days ago.
Okay. Yep. Can you describe what the extra storm damage is?
Sure. So what you can see here is, so we have, this, I hesitate to call it existing wall, but, remnants of wall that are here. And what happened, and it happens in these types of storm events, you get this overtopping that occurs. And so, you've got a lot of hydrostatic pressure that gets on the back side of the wall and just pushes it out. There's no drainage behind these, these older walls. that coupled with, with a pretty heavy wave action is what's led to the failure. Plus, these walls they're not reinforced. These older walls, if you look, inside of it, a lot of these older walls were just block, that were then, were faced with, rocks that, maybe came from the beach or that were brought in. There's no reinforcement or anything, that we see in these walls. You can see the areas of, the, collapsed, eroded areas on the backside. And so, I can tell you what we've seen, is, our team has been visiting numerous properties, up and down the coast here over the past few days. So it has not been uncommon to see these types of walls fail. What we have seen, that has stayed in place and that has survived pretty well have been the revetments. That's your sloped riprap, which is what we have proposed here for this property. That we're going to be replacing, the portions of wall that have failed, with a riprap revetment. The revetment, really what that does is that whenever those waves come in, now instead of that wave coming in, hitting the wall and going straight up and straight down, which is what, you get erosion on both ends that way, that revetment just really helps dissipate and break up that wave energy. And there's no toe necessarily for that energy to erode into. So Dave, if you want to move to the next pictures. Yeah, that's the same video. So what we've done here, just to, we've taken, photographs from the application when we were here previously from our initial review, and then we're just lining them up side by side with, the locations as they are today, so you can get a little bit of a sense of just what that last storm did. Next slide, please. Yeah, same location here. You can see now that, the backside has collapsed. Next slide, please. Same location there. Next slide. Yeah, so before, I spoke about how much of the pipe had been exposed, and you can see now we have a lot less pipe exposed, but, that's because, we now have, probably at least an additional foot or so of erosion that's occurred.
I'm sorry, and those pipes are drainage from a? What?
Yeah, those are foundation drains. So those are, that's a pretty typical application of like a perimeter drain.
Okay.
Yep, that's all just groundwater.
Right.
Yep. Next slide, please. Yeah, and that gives you a view alongside of the current status of the wall. Next slide, please. So just as a recap, what we're looking at here, the area in red is the areas, that are eroded, that we're proposing to stabilize. The area in purple is an existing riprap revetment that is staying in its current location. So we're not proposing any changes in that area. Next slide, please. So this hasn't been updated, but I think the point is still true here, where we've shown areas of erosion just on the backside of the existing revetment, and at this point nothing has changed in terms of the scale or the scope of what we're proposing for a project. Next slide, please. And now again, if we were to go out there today and take grade shots for existing grade, you would see that purple line would be distinctly lower and further back. Next slide, please. So our proposed revetment improvement here, you'll see is directly behind the purple is where we're going to remove the damaged portions of wall and replace that with revetment, riprap revetment that's going to just curve around, follow the curvature of the shoreline there, and then whenever it gets to the end, it'll taper down to meet the existing grade. Next slide, please. And then here's our cross sections. Nothing has changed here. And, yep, that's it. Thank you, Dave.
So you'll end up probably removing some more of the wall that failed? It looks like a considerable amount of additional wall failed.
Yeah, so really where I think we saw the failure, so on the initial application, we identified a crack.
Yep.
And I think from what we've observed, that's really where it broke. So at this point, the scope of the project still remains the same. So yeah, so I'm happy to answer
So I
any
just
questions.
make sure I understand, Werner, I think what you showed is that the vulnerability of the property, and you've gone out and checked it out, and there's no change to the plan.
That's correct, yes, not at this,
Still gonna
not at
remove the
this
same
point.
sections of wall that you were going to before, and the only thing that's changed maybe is you better do it quick, or the plan might have to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there may be just some additional backfill material that winds up
of
being brought
course.
in,
Yes,
to
no,
deal
I-
with
I
the,
understand that.
to deal with the erosion and, that occurred in the upland area, but that's just part and parcel with the
Yeah.
project. But, yeah, other than that, the same, project remains the same.
So
The-
does
the-
DEP
I'm sorry.
have, what are you waiting for with them?
Yeah, so these types of projects, they get filed, so when they get filed locally, they also, because it's a NERPA filing requirement, that also gets filed with the state. And so right now, and that gets shared concurrently with the Army Corps. And so that filing has been done, and so that's currently in their review process. And so typically what we look for, with these, with projects like this is that we file the NERPA permits and get the Army Corps review going, but then we concurrently, file the local permit. And so, with the idea that once the NERPA and the Corps permits are issued, that we're then ready to go directly to construction.
Thank you.
Do you have any reason to believe that the permit wouldn't be granted?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think, what we get, we'll get a round of questions. We'll get, questions that'll come back, and DEP will, they'll look at, alternatives analysis, they go through that, is this the best solution for this location? Typically with something like this, you go through a process, right? You look at it and say, all right, is the best solution to replace the wall, as it sits. And, for many reasons, in these types of locations, these vertical walls really are not, they're not the best solution, to protect a property and to mitigate, some of the wave action. Then you may see another option that is, well, what if you just do nothing? Well, we know what the result is going to be if we do nothing. We'll continue to see additional failure, and we'll continue to see additional erosion. So that winds up being dismissed, and so we go through these different alternatives of design because that's part of the NERPA filing, and so we'll get questions back and forth. On
Even
things like that.
considering their workload, I'm sure is going to be big because of these last two storms. There'll be more on their plate.
Yep.
Is their main focus to make sure that the solution does no harm, rather than is it the optimal solution?
Well, I think I think you have to keep in mind that the NERPA rules come from the perspective of protecting the natural resource.
Right.
Right. And so, and oftentimes what we're doing here is we're coming at it from the perspective of, protecting,
The upland.
we're protecting, real estate and personal property. We're
course.
protecting somebody's property here.
Yes.
And so ultimately, through good design and good communication, there is agreement that is essentially met in the middle, right? Is how do we balance, the protection of the natural resource, but also balance that with the protection of developed property, and people's
Well,
homes.
that makes perfect sense. I think just through my lack of technical depth in this area, though, I guess I'm struggling to see how this could be infringing on the natural resources.
I mean,
It
there,
seems like a relatively conservative and proven approach, and not one that, you know, is at the harbor mouth that's gonna divert wave action to somebody else, or,
right. Now, we have a pretty good sense of what we know works, and know what will, you know, what meets the intent of NERPA. And so, you know, we work to bring projects forward that, you know, that will pass. You know, we're not, you know, we don't bring projects forward that, you know, that we don't think meet the intent, you know, of what, you know, what the NERPA rules are. You know, and a lot, you know, some of this, ultimately, same thing, it will result in, you know, we'll have timing restrictions, you know, things like that. You know, I mean, that's a protection item, you know. You know, I'm sure there'll be a restriction in there that during plover season, you know, that, you know, no construction activity will occur, you know, things like that.
Sensible.
You know, I mean, ideally, a lot of these projects really occur in the wintertime anyways. You know, they occur at times, you know, whenever, normally the ground's froze. You know, you don't have, you don't tend to have a lot of wildlife present, you know, at that point. You know, so normally we would be seeing projects that are in these locations would be occurring right now.
so best case, when do you think this work might be started?
Well,
Best
you know, a
case.
lot of it just depends on the timing with DEP. Practically speaking, this could be, you know, this may likely be an early fall,
All right.
you know, early fall project.
Thank you.
You know, by the time, you know, we get through and past, you know, the bird habitat timeframes and, you know, making sure that we have everything else lined up. So, but I can tell you, and I'm not going to speak to it just on this project, but, you know, there are other areas where emergency work is being done right now, you know, where there's very much, you know, where there are very direct, you know, safety concerns.
Sure.
We do know that that type of work is happening throughout the state.
Larry?
Okay, so first, Werner, let me say I appreciate your speedy response to our questions from last time. Got that in email form. And so I'm glad to hear you say that you've submitted the permit by rule request to DEP, but I didn't actually see it in the application. I have drafted a finding of facts, and I've made that a condition.
Yep.
So I don't know if you need to update it, but, you know, we talked about it, so that should be okay.
Yeah, so we do, every time a NERPA is filed, there is a copy that gets submitted to the town. You know,
Okay.
so there's a full copy of the NERPA application that goes on record at the town.
Okay.
In fact, when we notify, there is a butter notification process that happens there, and it directs them to the town hall, you know, if they want to review the NERPA application there.
Okay. And then really my last question is, so based on the storm, which I guess is slightly worse than the 1978 storm, that's what I've heard, are your D50 rock sizes of 4 feet and 5 feet going to be big enough, or do you want to reassess, you know, the size of the boulders you're going to put in there? That's just, and if so, is that going to affect the application? I mean, I don't know.
Sure. No, that's a good question. I think if Norm's out there in the audience, I'll maybe ask Norm to weigh in on that.
Hold on. Norm can speak. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we had already sized it for the storms that we are seeing today. That's what the new FEMA maps are all about. So I think we're good with the 4 and 5 foot rocks. I also wanted to say that there is a possibility that if we can get the work done this spring, we will do that, but it'll definitely be outside of plover season.
Okay, thank you. All right. And so I guess my last question is, so you're going to remove a great deal of the existing stone retaining wall. Are you actually going to move it off-site, or are you just going to repurpose it on the location? I mean, does it matter? I mean, where are you taking this stuff?
Yeah.
Is there a landfill you're gonna take it to, or are you just gonna break it up and use it as riprap behind the riprap that you're gonna put in? I mean, what's the plan, what's the plans for it?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect really, you know, that material is going to be pulled off site.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's it, so I'll have the finding of facts next time.
Okay, great.
you.
Thank you.
Scott, any questions?
No, all set.
Mike?
Thank you.
I'm good,
Okay.
thanks.
I just have a curiosity question. Have you looked at the sand deposition where Batson River comes in there? Has it deposited sand or has it taken it away?
So at that particular location, so no, I mean, we haven't, you know, we don't wind up really analyzing, you know, much beyond this, the scope of the project here, especially since we're right directly adjacent to the shoreline in terms of the sand composition. We do have the location, where the end of the wall where the revetment ends essentially is at the end of where a mapped dune system begins, and so we've stopped it at that mapped location.
Okay, I was just curious as to your observations though after the storm.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you we've seen a lot of sand disappear.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see where it reappears.
Okay. All right, if there are no more questions from the board, then I'll open the, oh, go ahead.
Just a clarification point, because I was thinking about what Larry said on removing, the old wall. Isn't that a DEP requirement to remove the old wall and not use it?
It's not part of our construction plan. There's, as part of our plan, we don't have an intent of using any of the existing material there for backfill or anything of that nature.
But not required? Either
Not
way?
necessarily, no. I mean, it's not, on some other projects, maybe where there's riprap that's of a smaller size, that's being supplemented, it's not uncommon to reuse that, material just to repurpose it elsewhere. But this material doesn't fit the spec of what we're looking to accomplish there.
Thank you.
Norm, you can still speak.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, yeah, that wall is gonna be taken out of there. Originally, we had planned on putting the riprap up against the existing wall, but the ocean took care of about another 60+ feet of that for us. So, yeah, that'll all be removed.
Okay, good.
Any other questions from the board? No? Okay. In that case, I'll open the public hearing. I don't think there's anybody here that wants to speak. Do we have anybody out there that has a hand raised?
No other hands raised.
Okay. Then I'll close the public hearing, and I'll call for a motion to approve.
So I move to approve the application.
Okay,
My second?
okay.
I approve.
I approve.
Approve?
Approve.
Approve.
Okay, then. Next time, we'll
Next
have
time.
a findings of fact.
Yep.
You're all approved.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Werner.
Okay, then, the only other item on our agenda basically is to continue a discussion of the proposed land use ordinance changes. I don't know if all of you have met Galen. He's our new code enforcement officer,
Okay.
New Director of Planning and Development.
new director of planning and development. Sorry, I'm old school here.
Yep.
Anyway, I'll probably still call you a CEO.
All correct, every time.
Anyway, I just want to point out, after talking with Galen, that, this is mandated. These changes are really mandated by the state of Maine. They're coming through basically regarding affordable housing. And the law requires, basically for us, because we need a vote to change ordinances, to make major changes to ordinances, it requires a vote by July, which is the next time I believe people vote on anything in the town. And so that requires it to go before the Board of Selectmen, which is done, it's done once, it's already been there once.
It's going to go this next upcoming time, yep.
And it's going to go this next upcoming week. But because it's a land use ordinance change, the Growth Planning Committee is working with Galen to make these changes. But because it's a land use ordinance change, it's before the planning board to observe and to make any comments. And I'll leave it to Galen to explain that. I only have one question on it going through.
Yep, absolutely. So, again, this is a state mandate. I'm sure that you've been briefed on this multiple times, but I want to make sure that you're comfortable with this, as there are some provisions that might impact future subdivision, especially when it comes to affordable housing, that you should be aware of. And so I gave you the latest update. The Growth Planning Committee just met yesterday, so this is hot off the press with some additional proposal changes that the committee thought the select board should explore. And so what does LD 2003 do? LD 2003 impacts accessory apartments in the town. We have to allow accessory apartments within the town, and they are exempt from your growth permit standards for the town. We also have to prohibit parking standards for accessory apartments that are above the residential requirements for the existing parcel. There is a provision with affordable housing. So if it's in your growth area or in public water and sewer, you have to allow for 2.5 times your base residential density for those areas. And so that might be something that you may see a little bit when it comes before for a subdivision review. And then the state law also requires that we can only require 2 parking spaces for every 3 units that are designated for affordable housing development.
And there's no way to go around that.
Nope. Nope. So I just want to make you aware, like if you see an application, that might be something that is different, so.
Yeah. Because, I mean, parking's already an issue in a number of areas here. And, I just wasn't sure if there was any allowance for a municipality to change that to the same as they had for a 1-bedroom apartment, 1 lot. Not even having a full lot per house makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, LD 2003 was clear, it's a shall, it's not a should or could. So we have to abide by those standards. And I think the thought process by the legislature, there's a lot of good planning books out there about, you know, when it comes to the cost of development, one of the major costs that they realized was parking spaces for especially affordable housing projects, where they don't use all the spaces that are required. I asked the Growth Planning Committee last night, how many parking spaces are there in town? And no one can give you an answer. And most towns can't give you an answer how many parking spaces they have. So that's, it is a concern, it's a valid concern. You know, what are we gonna do about parking? And it's gonna be more of an enforcement issue if there are parking on the road or in other places.
Because I know within the statute, if I'm renting a room in my house, I have to have a parking spot for each room I'm renting. And that's not even a house.
But that's a different situation.
And again, this is, the developer can always propose, they can come before you and say, we want to have 2 parking spaces per development. We just can't mandate that they have that. We have to mandate that it's.
Okay, so
They can always put more.
a developer can.
Yep.
It's the floor.
Yep.
The floor number.
Yep. And then the 5th part that I tried to summarize LD 2003 as much as possible is allowing 2 residential units town-wide on parcels. They do have to comply with your lot coverage requirements as well as your lot density. And then it can go up to 4 units if you're within your growth area or again on public water and sewer. And so again, that might play a little bit of a difference. The Growth Planning Committee is not setting any recommendations for that last part that I just mentioned. They're not comfortable yet. I'm going to be doing a modeling project for them on our map to show this is our current land use standards, and this is what will change if we adopt LD 2003 to show them the difference visually in the impact. But In my quick review, I've only been here for a few weeks. My quick review, it looks like your duplex, the 2-unit situation is not going to be an issue in your town, but it's that 4 units. I need to look at your growth area and your zoning in those areas.
And is there, the only thing I was thinking was capacity for the sewer and water, and, having the capacity to put that in, that density. And I'm not familiar enough with the water and sewer system, how stretched it is, but I get the indication in a lot of areas it's already stretched.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but when a subdivision or site plan does come before you, you do usually ask for evidence that they have wastewater and water capacity. So that's where you as the board
Yeah.
will have that ability to
Yeah,
say,
so it's,
where's that letter?
yeah, okay.
Yep.
So as long as we can still ask the question.
absolutely. They're gonna trigger subdivision if they're doing an affordable housing. They need those extra units to make the economics work.
I appreciate that you gave us that memo with the clarifications. That helped a lot.
Yeah.
But my understanding is, when we're looking at Article 7 there, our accessory apartments and, under D, accessory apartments are not permitted in the shoreland zone unless the lot on which it will be located has at least double the lot size for that zone, double the minimum lot size, and double the shore frontage for that zone. Is this okay with the state 9.3? I think it is, because they're saying you can't ask for excess. But what we are asking for is, because you're going to have another unit there, is to have them have the minimum lot size.
Yep, I believe that was actually in the statutory language, and, I believe Warner did update this ordinance before he left to comply with LD 2003 in that aspect.
Warner, you want to comment?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that language, the restrictions surrounding the shoreland zone piece of it have actually been in the ordinance for quite some time. That language came in, back when accessory apartments first, you did your first major overhaul, on the ordinance that allowed for a lot more accessory apartments in town. And one of the concerns at the time was, everybody had the concern was, well, what's going to happen at the beach, right? That was the big concern, was that all of a sudden every house down there, down at Goose Rocks was going to have an ADU. And so as part of that, we included that language that within the shoreland zone, that you had to, in order, to get another dwelling unit, you had to, show that you, doubled the minimum lot size requirements. And that language does come straight from Chapter 1000 guidelines. At the general base zoning for the shoreland zone. So if a community doesn't have any zoning whatsoever, and the only zoning that they have is the shoreland zone, that's the density requirement for the shoreland zone. It sets a minimum lot size of your 40,000 within the shoreland zone. So we just reiterated that back whenever whenever we opened up the allowances for ADUs in town.
Okay.
Yeah, so you won't have any conflicts there with with the state on that.
I didn't
Yeah.
think so, but I wasn't completely sure when they were talking about, not asking for anything in excess over what you already have for adding affordable housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what it says, Nina, is that the housing structure must comply with shoreline zoning requirements established by the Department of Environmental Protection under Title 38, Chapter 3 and the municipal shoreline zoning ordinances. So
Yeah.
they're not exempting them, and it's not good policy for having those accessory apartments as well as affordable housing in a vulnerable area like that.
Right.
You have to follow those same
Right.
rules. I wanted to stay on Article 7 just to bring this is some of the new features that, I know I sent this language out to you, but I wanted to bring it to your attention, that way you're all informed on it. The accessory apartments, there was concern over stormwater, concerns on, what would happen if someone puts in a detached accessory apartment and water flow onto a neighboring abutter. And so they did put some stormwater standards in there. especially, specifically for accessory apartments to try to mediate any kind of, increased sheet flow that might occur from, any proposed development. So what-
Can I ask a question about that?
Yep.
This is subordinate to a larger question, really, and that is, if we're changing the language with respect to accessory apartments, which we understand is already accommodated by our ordinance, we should understand why we're making additional changes. And here we have one that says, I mean, if I read that we're making this change, it implies that our current ordinance allows accessory apartments that are gonna be impactful of stormwater management to be built. And I'm surprised to hear that. I don't think that's the case. I think code enforcement already worries about any addition that's made, whether it's gonna affect stormwater. Why do we need to add language to the ordinance for this?
So in your specifics, of your land use code, you have the ability for stormwater management when it comes to site plan and subdivision, but there are exemptions in your, standards for stormwater, for single family as well as, accessory uses on the property.
I guess, Ed, the way I was looking at it is I could put up an additional garage or expand my house and not have do the stormwater, yet if it's an accessory apartment, I have to.
Why?
And that, but yeah, that makes no sense to me. It should,
I think well, say it either way.
yeah.
If this is an issue, if this is a concern, then it should apply across the
Right, we
board.
should fix it.
We shouldn't be singling out accessory apartments for this.
Especially in light of the recent storm, the Growth Planning Committee has discussed that yesterday, and they are going to be looking at a town-wide for stormwater. In the meantime, they want to put something in at least for now, but they are going to be coming back eventually for.
Okay.
So what, why is it helpful to add this language to item B? It must be, they're either attached to the principal building or standalone, shall meet the design criteria of, and I'm not sure what this is, Article 240, Article 6, Section 6.2, where appropriate, as well as Article 7.1C of this ordinance. This sounds like a lawyer's letter that I get in the mail that I don't understand, and I have to go pay somebody to explain it to me.
Yep.
In general, we've been so happy that our land use ordinance is, in general, readable. Yeah, there's some areas that maybe aren't as crisp as we'd like them to be. This looks like it's moving in the wrong direction. This is a very dense, and this is an example. I mean, in general, the general trend is to put in very dense language that needs to be parsed. And I'm gonna have questions, if that's of interest, on a lot of the proposed additions. I'll challenge your opening statement that said, I know you've been briefed on this many times. Well, I'm here to tell you, this is the third time that we've talked about this. Werner gave us a pitch 5 or 10 minutes after a planning board meeting when the changes were made the last time for accessory apartments. That was very informative. And then Jay, a couple of weeks ago, we spent maybe 20 minutes looking at this. We didn't talk about it in any depth. We said there was going to be more discussion, and now this is the third time. We haven't looked at this except very superficially. Now that's okay, but if you want the planning board to say to their neighbors, among ourselves, yeah, this stuff makes sense. We should go do this. I'm not in a position to do that right now. Now, maybe that's not important. But if it's not, what are we doing here? What is the purpose of us reading this and going over it? If it's not to understand it and help to clarify it.
Absolutely. So again, that's why we're here tonight, to have these discussions and conversations. I can address your point on subsection B. That was from the Growth Planning Committee. They were concerned with detached structures with the design standards. And so that's what that reference is in reference to, is your townwide regulations under Article 6 subsection 2, which is your height restrictions, and there's some other restrictions that it's referencing.
Isn't there a way to make that clearer?
So what normally happens is when you have it on the E-codes, they do cite, and we have this in your land use code currently, it has live links that takes you to those sections.
I guess it kind of surprising that just
I might
because
have
I'm calling it an accessory apartment, I'm not having to follow the other part of the code. So I'm either making a building, which is covered by the code, or I'm not. And just because I'm calling it an accessory apartment, suddenly I have to reference something again, which it seems double
What if I
swinging.
build it and it's not an accessory apartment, and then later I
Yeah.
decide to convert it to an accessory
I-
apartment? Does that
yeah.
trigger some,
Yeah.
additional action?
I gotta change something. It's.
this seems crazy.
For me, I have a building code, and now we're just saying it applies to accessory apartments. Okay, unless there's something very specifically about that that is different than a normal building, yeah, we need to address it if it changes. But if I'm, the height's the height. It doesn't matter if it's accessory or a regular building, and we ought to cover that with the code.
So let me make another thought, go another way. It worries me that the Growth Planning Committee, and I don't know the gentlemen and women involved in that, but are forming this language. To me, if this is what the Code Enforcement Office says, then I'm gonna go, I guess, do a little more homework and try to understand and parse that sentence and all, but is this what the Code Enforcement Office is saying is the right thing to do, and this is important because currently our code is deficient?
There's a gap or something in the code.
And then, and if that's true, then I ought to be able to offline go to Werner and say, how the hell did you ever let this go through before? And ask you, isn't there a way we can make this sentence clearer?
Right.
This shouldn't be coming from somebody who doesn't have the boots on the ground experience.
Again, the Growth Planning Committee, if you look at the town code, they are entrusted with land use code changes. And so they are the policymakers offering the recommendations to the select board. Certainly, town staff has looked over these proposals. We looked at the implementation aspects of it, and certainly there's gonna be still opportunities to make amendments as needed. But they are entrusted in the code. That's what it clearly says, that they are the ones to propose amendments in the land use code.
Where does it say that?
I get it for you.
Okay. I'd just be curious.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening here is the state is mandating something, and they're mandating it fairly quickly.
I don't think the state is mandating anything to do with all accessory apartments
Oh, what we have already?
have to, yeah, no, this language that says that accessory apartments have to meet certain design criteria, this is above and beyond that.
Yeah, there is something.
This is just,
parts
we're
of
having
it.
an opportunity, we're in there, we're
Yeah.
gonna go meddle with it.
And I would say similar to the stormwater piece is that's not coming from the state, that's somebody else
It's a
trying to.
community's concern.
Absolutely.
That's where this is coming from. So, I
is.
mean, there is
Stormwater's coming from the state.
community concern with the state mandate. And so, as a community, you can have this conversation. It's a rigorous debate and discussion. Do you want to just flatline accept, this is what the state mandate is, or do you want to put safeguards and parameters in place to protect the quality of life standards of the community? And the Growth Planning Committee has had those discussions, and they're determining these are some of the safeguards we'd like to put in. Again, the select board can say no, we
Let's
don't
just
like
look at
any of them.
H here for just a second. Any additions to the primary structure or new standalone accessory apartment shall provide a stormwater analysis and were recommended by the study author. Recommend stormwater improvements shall be put in place as part of the permit issue. What does that even mean?
Where are you?
I'm on H, the change to Article 7H.
Articles.
So it says,
40-71.
if I'm modifying my home to,
Yep.
excuse me, if I'm modifying my home and I come to the town and I say, I'm gonna add on an accessory apartment. I'm gonna be required then, as the applicant, to provide a stormwater analysis. Is that am I reading that correctly? Now, what does it mean, and where recommended by the study author?
So you're
Rec-
reading outdated language, we crossed that out, that was the growth planning committee, I just had the attachment.
I'm sorry, there's new language
Yep,
here?
right here, yep. Is that, which one?
That's the one you sent us on the 11th, I
Yep,
think.
I just dropped one off at each one of your desks.
Right,
Okay,
No one,
Let me-
January 17th.
Let's see if I think that's the one.
all right.
Yep, there you go. So that original language that you had that you were referencing, that was something the Southern Maine Planning put in for us as a placeholder.
That didn't come from the Growth Planning Committee.
No, that was Southern Maine Planning, put some language in there for the growth planning to mull over because they were concerned over stormwater. At last night's meeting, they added this in, which I think is a little bit more detailed and might explain a little bit of how it would work. And to answer your question over the growth planning committee, that is Article 4, Section 529. Currently, the planning board is unable to commit to the time necessary to undertake the inquiry and analysis to make findings and recommendations necessary for thorough planning. This section establishes a permanent committee to undertake such inquiry and analysis to make findings and recommendations to the planning board and to the Board of Selectmen in order to update and maintain the comprehensive plan. And then there's a section about land use in this.
You're saying that, so, where is that again?
That is
Article 4.
Section 529.
Okay.
It's under boards and committees under administrative code. Yep. I thought.
So
it was-
you're saying that the
again,
growth, no,
Yeah.
I've only been doing this 4, 5, 6 years now, but we haven't had this come up before, where we've had the Growth Planning Committee propose a change for our review. You're saying that their job is to propose changes for,
Any proposed actions affecting the consistency of the comprehensive plan, including any amendments to the land use ordinance and any long-range capital expenditure plans shall be submitted to the growth planning committee prior to the presentation of the town meeting and the committee's review and recommendations. They have full review.
no, but what you said before was it's their job to
They do the
propose,
comprehensive plan. Yep,
I understand that, and we just approved
yep.
a major enhancement to it, the 10-year cycle. But now, beyond that, this is a change in order to accommodate, to acknowledge LD 2003.
Yep, and it's amending your land use code.
And their job is to propose changes that are reviewed by, who did you say?
It was both the planning board and the town select board.
So are we being asked then to review and approve it? Because that hasn't been made clear.
Right, because I thought you said growth, the growth,
Well, but their job, he just read, was
Their
for
job
them
is
to
to
propose
propose
to us
I got it.
Then it goes.
and the
to
select board.
The planning board and the board of selectmen. But it's the board of selectmen that actually approves
There are the
the
ultimate
language.
ones that,
No, actually,
It goes to town
the
voters,
town
so it's-
is
Yeah, it's
the
the voters of
ultimate.
the town.
Right.
Yep.
They approve it for putting on the ballot for the
Yep.
voters of the town, basically.
I'm just hearing it for the first time. I haven't studied Article 4, but I thought what I heard was the Growth Planning Committee has the job of proposing the changes for review by the planning board and the selectmen.
Yep.
And then it goes to the town.
so really, we're here just to comment on their comments before they submit it to the Board of Selectmen.
yep.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
select board can make changes, that's their prerogative.
Yeah,
Well, I'm assuming that the planning board can recommend changes as well.
Yes.
You can-
Is tonight's a deadline for us, or
I
do we?
have to
Well, I think
submit
we just,
tomorrow.
we just got the changes tonight, so I don't think that's very practical.
I agree.
I have to submit, according to the the town clerk, I have to submit the language to her on the 18th. But, and they unanimously agreed to send this forward. But certainly, the select board can make
Well, they
changes.
can do that, but just please don't say that the planning board approved it.
Right.
yeah.
It's only been one day.
So you're really just discussing
Been
this
0
with us.
days.
So,
Is there,
so I did have a couple of other questions. So, on the first, on your cover sheet here,
Yep,
you talk about limits due to public sewer and water, okay? But what about electrical supply? Is that ever an issue?
Nope, that's not something that the law addressed.
We just presume there's gonna always be enough electrical power available. We're gonna build a little electrical generating plant over on the 86-acre plot, I guess.
Didn't make the requirements for that.
Okay, and on this parking spots, 2 spaces for every 3 units, is that a specific number, or is it not less than, or not more than? This is exactly two units for 3, 2 spaces for 3 units. Is that what that is? Exactly?
Yep, I can read you the statutory language.
Okay.
They have specific parking standards for that. The municipality shall allow for an affordable housing development where multifamily buildings are allowed and have dwelling unit density of 2.5 times the base density that otherwise allowed in the location, and may not require more than 2 off-street parking spaces for every 3 units.
May not require
May not require.
2 for every 3?
I'm not sure what that means.
How do I interpret that? What does that mean?
That's what it says.
Okay, that's quite ambiguous.
That is what
So,
it
It
says,
says
but
may not require.
may not require, so it doesn't specify how many, it just says you can't require 2 for 3.
You cannot require more than 2 off-street parking
Oh,
spaces. for
not, oh, so this is not more than 2.
Yeah.
So
Not
the
more than
town-
2.
Town can't make a regulation.
They can put more in
basically
their
that says it
proposal.
has to be 3.
Or 1. Can't say
No,
1.
but it-
One
Yeah,
for
they
one.
can't regulate what it is.
I'm-
The
I'm
state
just-
is already regulated.
I'm just trying to
There's a
understand.
minimum.
Well,
it says on 240.21 word use that the words shall and will are mandatory. The word may is permissive. So it's really just a suggestion. It's allowed. It's not,
so you could
it's
allow,
confusing
It
is
is
what it is,
confusing.
because the definition says may is the wrong word to be using if you're trying to
so you could
really say
actually.
shall.
So,
Mandatory.
so,
Good catch.
so that brings me back to my question. So is this exactly 2 for, 2 spaces for 3 units? Or is it not more than 2 spaces for 3 units, or not less than 2 spaces for 3 units?
You
See?
can't make the regulation. The regulation is there. You cannot, I think what that's saying is you cannot require 1. You cannot require 3. But if the developer comes to you and says, okay, the requirement is 2 by the state, I'd like to put in 3, you can allow it.
Okay, well, I'd like a little more discussion on that topic, because this is definitely going to come up at some point.
Yep.
It's ambiguous to me at the moment.
I
So,
think it's a good example of
Yeah.
why this is being done without review.
yeah, well,
Very quickly.
it's definitely going to come up, and so, it'd be really nice to have a nice, big, clear statement. Anyway,
So the
I-
problem is, if we're not clear, it's not gonna be clear to the voters,
It's-
and
but-
then it's not gonna get passed, and then where are we gonna be?
well, it'll probably get passed, and then it'll come, and then somebody's going to make a proposal, and we're not going to know what the rules are. See, so it'd be great to have a little more amplification about that. Then, my last thought, well, before I get to that, so then on your land use page here.
Yep.
You're talking about 7, Article 7. So on paragraph G, clause 1, this is a typo, I guess. Existing septic system must be evaluated for condition RULD. I don't know what that is, capacity. Is that a typo, or is that something I didn't know?
So what happens is when we download off E-codes,
Yeah.
that's the code that's on there. We download it as a PDF. Sometimes that PDF converts it.
Oh.
I was just talking before the meeting, and there's other ones throughout the document.
Oh, so that's it should be PDF.
It's a PDF conversion, like when
Yeah.
it converts it to Word. That's
Okay.
what happens. It messes up the
Oh,
font.
okay.
I would only focus on where the amended language is. That's what is gonna update with the E-codes.
Okay, all right, so that's kind of a typo,
Yep.
it's, okay. And then, while we were sitting here talking about this, I'm thinking about, how this could, be reflected townwide. I mean, can you produce a map that shows the areas where you could have 2 residential units or 4 units, you know, having a map to clarify which part of this ordinance applies on the town?
I did do a quick parcel research. Again, it doesn't take into consideration wetlands and other type of geological limitations. So we did have that available, and I believe
Oh,
that was
good.
already sent to, April sent that out to you as part of my first memo. There's parcels in there.
Yeah,
Um,
but they're hard to figure it
You
out.
you
Okay.
couldn't really work from the small size of them.
Okay, so there will be a map.
Yep.
That is gonna be part of the proposal to the Board of Selectmen and the town, right?
I can, yep.
That would be really good. I think that's gonna be very helpful.
I'm trying to work on one right now to, again, to deal with the 2 to 4 unit concept, because again, the growth planning committee was not comfortable with that. Just to show what the existing land use is currently, and then what the proposal with LD 2003, how
That'd
that's
be-
gonna change it.
That'd be really helpful, yeah. Thank you.
Can I make
Okay.
a simple suggestion?
Yep.
Where it says under terminology, the word "he" means either he or she, I'd say the word "he" means a person.
There you go.
I don't think that's a
I'd change
change.
any-
That's not a proposed change.
I
That
would
was- That was
propose
something
it.
that's in your current,
I would propose it
Now, when we're
if
changing
we're
them,
changing things to go along with stuff. The word "he" means a person.
Could we look at just the first page of what you handed out tonight here?
yep,
And see if we could at least understand what the 5 items are that the legislation requires. You know, have a feel that we understand it. I wanted to start at the bottom one just because it seemed like it's one we could take apart. But allow up to 2 residential units townwide on a parcel. So if I have a 1-acre lot today that is zoned single-family, it's not in a growth area, I'm in the village residential area, let's say I've got a 1-acre parcel. A lot of the lot is wooded, perhaps. Does this mean that we're going to allow a second home to be built on that 1 acre?
it has to meet your residential density requirement that's in your land use zoning.
I don't know what that means.
Means it has to be 2 acres.
So it has to be the 2 acres. If it's an acre minimal requirement
For
for a one.
a lot, is that per home?
I have to pull up your table.
That's per home,
I thought,
unless you're in a zone where it allows 20,000 feet.
Well, how is this a change from what we have today then?
I don't think it's really gonna impact, because I looked at your, is it farming, your forestry zone?
farm
Yep.
and forest.
That one, it does have
That one you can
duplexes
have
in
a
there.
duplex.
Yeah, you can have duplexes, and
Yeah.
then they do have a density requirement in there, so as long as they're meeting the density, you can do that under your current land use.
So you're saying that 5 really is
I think the sticking point your 4 is where you're gonna have.
no change to the current land use ordinance for item 5, except in the growth areas. Is that fair to say? I mean, I'd like this to be clear,
Yep,
not, well, no, you have to read between the lines. Or have to go read LD 2003. What are we going to put to the voters? Is Kennebunkport going to change because of this change that we're asking the voters to approve?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I want to know as a voter, and I'd like to be that clear about it. So when we say, well, no, we'll have to go look at the density, and isn't it already clear that there's no change except in the growth areas, and then only in those areas in the growth area that are connected to public sewer and water?
Currently.
Well, I don't understand the "or" in that sentence. And 4 units if located within growth area or public sewer water? Shouldn't that be "and"
nope,
connected to the public?
Oh, it's not, it's an or?
It's "or," yes. I didn't understand that either.
So if you're in a growth area 4 units are gonna be allowed
On a 1 acre lot,
on a 1 acre lot.
basically.
So it's 4 dwelling units per lot, if that, this is the legalese. 4 dwelling units per lot, if that lot does not contain an existing dwelling unit,
Yeah,
and the lot is located in a designated growth area
Yeah.
of the municipality consistent with its growth management, or it is served by public, special district, or other centrally managed water system and the public, special district, or other comparable sewer system in a municipality without a comprehensive plan.
Oh.
Now, there's a sticking point there with the comprehensive plan, and I've talked to Southern Maine Planning about that. There's that, well, we have a comprehensive plan, so that
So
shouldn't
does
apply.
the or not apply?
I think it's gonna get drawn out. I think it's going to get clarified in the courts, because it does say it's in not for the comprehensive plan, which how I would interpret it is that it's just in your growth area. But
So,
look at the affordable housing piece, it didn't follow that same trend.
so what are we gonna put to the voters, though?
You have the proposed language that's in there. We didn't touch the 2 to 4 units. We're not touching that right now.
Touching it?
Growth planning has not mulled that over at all. Like they've just been focusing on the parking, affordable housing, and the accessory apartments piece.
So the words that are proposed here, the changes, do not incorporate item 5?
Correct. I'm still doing research for them on that.
Okay,
We're not gonna meet the deadline for compliance with that section.
okay.
so the way that it seems to me is you can put 4 units on a parcel if it's located within a growth area where you have water, wells, and septic, or you can do it if the lot is served by public sewer and water.
Even if it's today zoned for single-family residential?
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
But it's in your growth area.
No,
No, it doesn't say that, it doesn't say.
says
growth-
or.
It says growth area or anywhere,
So,
vacant lot that's
I
served by,
summarized that for you. I'm reading you the state statute.
yeah,
The state statute says, except that a municipality shall allow up to 4 dwelling units per lot if that lot does not contain an existing dwelling unit and the lot is located in the designated growth area within the municipality.
yeah,
Consistent with, again, they reference the Growth Management Act.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
if the lot is served by a public, special district, or other centrally managed water system and a public, special district, or other comparable sewer system in a municipality without a comprehensive plan.
The comprehensive plan, right.
Okay, so that says, does not apply to Kennebunkport.
Technically not, that's how I would
No,
interpret
no, no.
Right.
That's not what
Yeah.
I'm objecting to you saying technically not.
No.
What is our position?
Yeah,
that. Well, that's our position
All right.
currently. Yep,
So
And obviously
then,
currently,
yes.
yeah.
then we shouldn't have anything after the or.
Right.
That's
what
right.
We're doing.
Yeah,
It should, if it doesn't apply to us, why would we update
Yeah.
or modify what we're doing?
yeah.
We
So-
would not.
So if you tailor
And
this,
then if it turns out that technically we were wrong and they come back, then we have to make a change.
But Mike, what I think we just heard was, even though it's on item 5,
We didn't touch any of that.
none of the language implements item 5, so
Nothing
never
we're
mind.
dealing with that right now.
It's not,
I'll update that for my memo to the Board of Selectmen, but
we're not doing 5.
no.
Right.
not
And
doing.
you'll
fine.
read that in the second page. At the very bottom, it says the GPC unanimously agreed to move forward with the proposed policy changes for select board and town vote consideration. The GBC has decided more review and discussion is needed for the 2 to 4 unit amendment.
I appreciate that, and I know I'm coming across as frustrated here, because I am. To get this, for review
Yep.
on the day of course, the first thing you're gonna do is read the first page. And you're saying, well, no, if you read the second page, you'll find out that what's on the first page really isn't all applicable. That's not where we need to be, right? We need to, so there's probably my primary feedback here is, it's not fair to the new guy either.
I just.
But
have
if you would
versus-
somehow use, use the limited resources you have here, and maybe you need challenge us to go give you some feedback in a more organized manner. Or don't review this and give you a hassle. But if we're going to review it, then that's the type of thing that just gets me wrapped around the axle, and I can't imagine that it's not going to do that to the voters as well.
Okay, well, this is the second time we've had this before us. Not in this particular way, but we've had this language start to come before us weeks ago. And we're under a timeline because of the state. We don't have the leeway that we would normally have. What Galen has suggested is having the planning board meet with the growth planning committee and bring any issues we have before, with the growth planning committee, try to straighten out and understand what is going to go before the voters and whether it makes sense. They would then bring that before the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen is going to get these recommendations very soon, tomorrow, okay? But that doesn't mean they can't change anything, and that doesn't mean that we can't meet with the Growth Planning Committee to, go through this in more detail.
And I could see that, and then because of the time constraint, we should be focused on only what's absolutely required.
Absolutely,
And I
Couldn't
would say
agree more.
Section
Yes.
H is not absolutely required.
right?
That's kind of a nicety thing that somebody wants to clean up. Why are we trying to shove that through on a fast track?
I agree, Mike.
And we can catch, if that's an issue, we can pick that up outside of it and give it the thought and discussion that it's required versus pushing it through.
Right.
I would agree.
Any other feedback that you have? And again, I'm cognizant of your time because I know this is the slower end of the season for the planning side of things. Things are gonna start picking up. So if there's someone that wants to be a representative from the planning board that'd like to go to the growth planning meetings, I'm acceptable to do that as well, instead of having a joint meeting between you two. I will say the growth planning committee, they are not involved with the site plan and the rigorous subdivision reviews that you all do. And I think that's why it's beneficial to have some voice that's there that can share their experiences on the planning board to this other volunteer board that is entrusted with the comp plan.
Right. Well, we also don't have, access all the time to the code enforcement office, basically, or whatever you call it. And because a lot of renovations and building and so forth comes before you, that doesn't come through to the planning board because, it's not under planning board purview. So it helps to know that too. There are codes there that we're not really familiar with that you
They're not part-
basically review as building permits come through.
Right, that's more in the building, the structural side of things,
Right.
which is, again, a little bit different than the land use side of things.
But you deal with setbacks on
Yeah.
single lots that are not in shoreland zone and are not non-conforming, so that, we don't deal with that at all.
Yep.
Unless they're a conditional
Unless they meet
use
one
or
of the
something.
triggers, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, I recommend we go and just meet with the Growth Planning Committee only on those issues that are gonna go before the Board of Selectmen and make it to basically July when people vote on it. And I'd also, that's the time, maybe you can bring some of this, if you're gonna have language that's gonna be difficult for voters to understand. That's the time when you have to point out to them, we need a clarification on the ballot so that, like we do sometimes, so that people understand what this means.
So, going forward, so you have to submit the final version tomorrow
Yep.
for consideration by the Board of Selectmen next week.
Yep.
And then this is gonna be on the ballot in June.
Yep.
And the expectation is it's gonna sail through. So what happens if the voters reject it? Then what? Big fine? Somebody comes and beats the town up?
That's the
What?
thing with LD 2003, it doesn't really stipulate what happens. Instead, what will happen is the developer will take us to court. And that's where
Is there a developer waiting in the wings to implement something?
I know of.
This is very expensive for a developer. I mean, I looked at the average median income of somebody in the Portland area and figured out what it was for rental housing, you know, the restrictions, the cap on rental housing and ownership. And I don't think they're gonna be able to build and
No.
make any
Well,
money.
unless it's something like the trust where it's gonna be subsidized, and that's
Exactly.
gonna be few and far
Exactly.
between.
Like the housing trust,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and if this does get approved by the voters in June, but then questions arise in July, do we get like Rev 2 the following year? How does that work?
So the next town vote, I believe, is in November.
Oh, November?
yeah.
And that's where I was hoping that we would have this rigorous discussion about the 2 to 4 units, and we can get that hopefully done.
By November, for the November vote?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds reasonable, yeah. So, okay.
So can you send to the planning board exactly what you're gonna put before the Board of Selectmen?
Yep.
Yeah, just keep
And
us in the
then we
loop,
have
yeah.
something that we
Yeah,
can start working.
Because I get the feeling we're gonna see this again
Oh,
before
yes.
November. Okay,
Yep.
Yeah,
yeah, all right.
okay.
And I guess my only recommendation would be to narrow it just to what's required, seeing we're pushing it through so quick. So if there's some things that are nice to haves or not absolute, maybe we can work on those more and get them in the November one.
Yeah.
And
How hard
making
would it-
sure we don't make a,
How hard would it be to identify of these proposed changes, which ones are absolutely required?
well, H isn't, I know that.
I'm
H is
just-
not, subsection B is not with the design standards. I is actually a clarification on that Article 7. That was a clarification of LD 1706. So that was a question about nonconformance of a lot.
You
and
got,
what's-
you got ahead of me here. If we just start at the top, if you want to try this. Article 7, right, is the
Article
first
7,
one. B is not required, right?
Yep,
H is not required.
that's correct.
What's the next thing?
Yep, and then I is at the very bottom
Okay,
page. It's right, it's in the blue font, it's at the very bottom. I put bubbles there to help. So that section comes from LD 1706, that was clarifying language. After the legislature passed LD 2003, they realized, oh crap, town meeting style government, needs a little bit more time to implement this.
okay.
So they extended implementation.
So you would argue that this is
Yes.
required?
That is.
Okay. Mike, you,
I got it?
Yeah.
All that says is basically if you place an accessory apartment on a non-conforming lot, it can't make the lot more
more
non-conforming.
non-conforming. And that's in line with
Yeah.
how we do
yeah.
so many other things.
Okay.
So then you go to word usage.
Yep, affordable housing density,
So I would argue that that section is required.
yep, that's just copy and paste.
We need to understand it, but it's required.
It is, yep.
Okay. What's next? 24715,
Yep, 715,
density.
yep, so that's the density bonus for affordable housing. All those sections are required except for section G. That was something that came up in the growth planning committee about short-term rental license prohibition.
Right.
They didn't want that to qualify for affordable housing or for that program, which normally they wouldn't, but they.
Wouldn't anyway. So G, maybe not.
And then growth permit requirements, this staff added in because there was such confusion over LD 2003 with accessory apartments, which aren't qualifying under your growth permits. But affordable housing still has to follow your growth permit structure. And so we wanted to put that language in there to help voters understand, because we had public attend the growth planning committee meeting, and they were getting confused over the two terms and what the state statute requires. So that's something staff recommended adding into it.
Clarification.
So the only thing I would say there is if we decide that's required, it would be helpful if this said, all affordable housing development shall comply with section 240, 1112, and then say what that section, what's its title?
Okay.
because when you read it right now, you
That's
can't,
growth permits.
you can't read it.
Yeah,
You know,
Comply with growth permanent requirements.
yeah, which is right there in bold.
Yeah, but I think it would just, again, to help people understand, it's not that big a thing to add in 3 words.
otherwise you're just in, again, what I was calling legalese territory.
Well, then you,
It's technically correct, but it's not, it raises a question when you read it.
what's 240.11.12? Oh, it's growth permit requirements, okay.
Right.
And then your last one is your parking standards, which is, again, that's required. We abbreviated it to a decimal point. That was in my absence before I got on board.
So it's
That
only,
was the calculation. That's 2 for every 3 spaces.
it's only D that's being
Yes.
changed, okay.
And the one, I think Nina brought this up last time. Where'd it go? I'm assuming this is regulatory language that says under affordable housing that it's got to be decent, safe, and sanitary.
Yep.
What was
Are
that?
those like defined terms, or what does that mean?
Those are the terms used in the main state statutes.
Statute.
I have no
Utterly
idea what
meaningless.
decent means
Yep.
there.
Safe, I can get my head around.
Safe
Sanitary.
and sanitary,
yeah,
iffy, but
safe.
decent is,
Yeah, it's like, what does that mean?
What section is that in, Mike?
That's affordable housing, page, oh, it's on the bottom of word usage and definitions. I just, if
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
direct, if it's a direct copy, then we gotta use the language, but I don't know what it means.
I don't know.
If you go Google that, it's interesting, you come up with an awful lot of references to the UK. Where apparently they're, you know, well ahead of us there, and
But
they have the same
if
questions.
it's a defined term that is known what it means, then excellent, but if it's not a defined term,
I can see
And,
some
you know.
irate preacher coming up and saying, that's not decent housing. They're smoking marijuana and they're drinking alcohol.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that would not qualify as decent.
what, that if I'm drinking
think that's
alcohol
exactly
in my residence?
Marijuana is legal. They can have their own
Oh, I thought
marijuana.
you were talking about doing it in an illegal way.
Oh,
Just not being
No.
decent about it.
I mean, if they're keeping the place like a pigsty or,
well, that's sanitary.
okay.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's both.
The
I- it's
question
just
is, are
like-
you gonna meet the Swiss standard of sanitary? You're gonna meet
Is this
the,
implying, for example,
Tennessee standard of sanitary?
that affordable housing is going to be held to a higher standard than
Then-
everybody else?
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
I don't think that's the
There's a
that's
court
the
case right
intent.
there.
Well, and then
Are
of
we
course-
required to have that in there? Why not just say affordable housing are dwelling units that
Defined
can
as
be
follows.
afforded by households in the following 2 categories? Why put those words in there that we
Well,
don't
I
know
think-
what they mean?
I think the inference is they're trying to get away from, well, where you have subdivision over and over again, where you get like slum housing, But my concern is, what happens if you hand over decent, safe, and sanitary dwellings and then they degenerate? Who's gonna bring them back up? Who's gonna define what those terms mean? I can see a whole body of work needed around the term, each of those terms, decent, safe, and sanitary. What do those mean?
Right, and I'm asking, could we avoid that whole
just
body of
using
work
them.
by leaving out those 3 words? Or are we required by law to use them?
I don't think you're required by law to use.
Well, I would take them out
Find
because
out, right.
each of those,
Omit them and
I could
then
see a
let case law take care
the
of
lawyer
it.
community will make a ton of money off of those 3 terms, each of those 3 terms.
Has that been a subject of discussion?
That has not been the subject of discussion.
I would get rid of them.
Yeah, I would omit.
Affordable housing is a dwelling that follows the income.
Is the following.
The
Yeah.
same qualifications that we put on single-family homes and duplexes and all of the other things that we permit and
You're just,
have in our
you
town.
can just simply argue you're omitting them because it makes it more restrictive. And you're not supposed to be more restrictive on affordable housing or accessory. that's your case. And then let other towns litigate them.
Interesting view.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we'll follow up on. Yeah. Okay, so where are we now? Are we throwing this back at Galen, saying thank you, good luck tomorrow?
I don't know, are we,
Interested, very interested to see what you come up with between now and tomorrow.
Yeah,
Looking forward to having it in my inbox.
Yeah.
And,
I'm gonna read it this time.
we're interested in meeting with the growth planning
maybe
committee.
you want to ask us
and-
for written feedback?
And welcome.
Yeah, thank you. If you want to provide written feedback, I'm
No,
more
no,
than happy to-
that's not what I said. I said, maybe if you want us to provide written feedback, you should ask for it. But if you're saying, if we feel like it, then you're gonna get what you got.
I think he has enough to go forward with.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see what comes up.
Yeah, yeah, I
I'm sure
agree.
there's going to be rigorous discussion from the community, definitely in the future.
I don't know.
No?
I think if the select board prompts it, yes, there will be.
Well, I think if the select board wants community involvement, they need to have some kind of a meeting where they discuss it with the town. I'm pretty sure a lot of people won't bother to read this. Or if they do read it,
Very
they won't,
hard to read right now.
or they won't be able to understand it so much.
Yeah.
Of course, the
Usually the voters approve if the select board basically puts in language that says this is to make the land use ordinance compliant with the mandated standards from the state of Maine.
And
As long as it doesn't affect their taxes,
And
they'll
if the
usually vote for
the
it.
select board stands behind it.
Yeah,
Says
basically, that's it, yeah,
We support this.
yeah.
Right, it won't cost you any money.
Right, there's no definition.
It's not clear to me that can be said yet.
Not yet, no.
Not for these changes with stormwater and everything
Well,
else.
Well, the potable water
I think
and
this is more restrictive.
potable water and sewer capacity is actually an issue. You might have to expand both of those facilities.
Okay.
That includes not just the collection pipes, but also the treatment plants.
Careful.
We already got an issue there,
Yeah,
if I remember right.
Well, this was a lot of fun.
well, so, welcome, Galen, good, yeah.
Welcome to the good time.
Yeah,
You can see,
why I
you
said
can see why we got rid of the last guy.
He doesn't have gray hair, though. Usually, when do they have gray hair?
It's coming back, yeah.
I'm losing some hair, this is
That's
shrinking.
children
No, I was
have
gonna
done
say,
that,
it's
though.
coming
That's
back
not us.
darker and better.
That's right.
Oh, okay, well, I'll take one more motion.
Oh, move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes,
Aye.
Aye, we're done.
thank you all.